My wife said she was meeting a friend for coffee. That should have been my first clue. Hazel never drinks coffee after 3 p.m., claims it keeps her awake, though I've seen her polish off a pot of espresso while working late on her legal briefs. But there I was, sitting in my truck across from Miller's Cafe at 4:30, watching the entrance like some paranoid husband from a bad television movie. Except Hazel never showed up at Miller's. Instead, I watched her silver BMW pull into the parking lot of a small medical building 3 blocks away, the Verrin Women's Health Clinic. Now, I'm no genius, but I know my wife's schedule better than she thinks I do. Her annual appointment was 6 months ago, so what was she doing there on a Tuesday afternoon lying to me about coffee dates? I'm Asher Trevin, by the way, 43 years old, owner of a small construction company that specializes in commercial renovations. Not exactly the sharpest tool in the shed, according to my wife's lawyer friends, but I know how to read blueprints, and I know when something doesn't add up. And this whole scenario had more red flags than a communist parade. The clinic's glass doors swallowed my wife whole, and I sat there for 20 minutes, engine running, trying to come up with innocent explanations. Maybe she was picking up test results. Maybe she was consulting about some female issue she didn't want to discuss with me. Maybe she was researching a case. Hazel works for Morrison & Associates, handles medical malpractice suits. But the knot in my stomach told a different story. When she emerged, 45 minutes later, Hazel looked different. Not sick, not worried, satisfied. Like someone who'd just gotten exactly what she wanted. She checked her phone, smiled at whatever message she'd received, and drove off without glancing in my direction. That night, over dinner, I asked about her coffee date. "Oh, it was fine," she said, not looking up from her salmon. "Just girl talk, you know how it is." "Which friend was it again?" "Jocelyn. We talked about work stuff mostly." Jocelyn Hale, Hazel's best friend since law school. Also the woman who'd answered her phone at 2 p.m. that same afternoon when I'd called to ask about borrowing her husband's trailer. She'd been in court all day, she'd told me. Hadn't talked to Hazel since the weekend. I pushed my food around my plate, watching my wife of 8 years lie to my face with the same ease she used to cross-examine witnesses. The same woman who'd stood in a church and promised to love, honor, and cherish me was sitting 3 feet away, spinning fiction like it was her day job, which, come to think of it, it basically was. "Everything okay at work?" I asked. "Same old corporate nonsense? Nothing you'd find interesting?" There it was, the subtle dismissal that had become Hazel's signature move over the past year. My blue-collar world couldn't possibly intersect with her sophisticated legal universe. I built things with my hands, she built cases with her mind. I dealt with contractors and building codes. She dealt with judges and precedents. But I wasn't as simple as she thought. The next morning, after Hazel left for the office, I called the Verrin clinic. Dr. Lumi Verrin herself answered. Small practice, personal touch, very discreet, according to their website. "I'm calling about my wife's appointment yesterday," I said. "Hazel Trevin. I wanted to make sure everything went well." "Oh, Mr. Trevin, congratulations. Everything looks perfect. 8 weeks along, right on schedule." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. 8 weeks pregnant. I did the math in my head, counting backward, cross-referencing with my work calendar. 8 weeks ago, I'd been in Phoenix for 10 days, overseeing the renovation of a hotel chain's flagship property. The biggest contract my company had ever landed, and I'd been hands-on from start to finish. "Are you there, Mr. Trevin?" "Yes," I managed, just processing the news. I understand it can be overwhelming, but Mrs. Trevin seems very happy about it. She mentioned how supportive her family has been during this time. Family. Right. Did she say anything else? Well, she did ask about discretion regarding the pregnancy. Wanted to make sure we wouldn't discuss it with anyone without her explicit permission. Very professional, your wife. I can see why she's so successful. I thanked Dr. Verrin and hung up, my hands shaking. 8 weeks pregnant. I'd been gone. But someone had been here, helping out around the house, keeping Hazel company while I was building my career 2,000 miles away. My brother Soren. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The same brother who'd been having financial troubles for the past year. The same brother I'd been supporting with odd jobs and loans I knew he'd never repay. The same brother who'd been spending an awful lot of time at our house lately, fixing things that weren't broken and cooking elaborate dinners for my wife while I worked late at job sites. The same brother who'd always been the charming one, the smooth talker, the guy who could convince anyone of anything if he turned on the right smile. I sat in my empty kitchen, staring at the coffee mug Hazel had left in the sink, and felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Not rage. That would come later. This was something more useful. This was clarity. My wife was pregnant with my brother's child, and they thought I was too stupid to figure it out. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Hazel went to work, came home, made dinner, and acted like the devoted wife she'd never actually been. I went to job sites, managed my crew, and played the role of the oblivious husband while my mind worked overtime, cataloging every detail, every inconsistency, every lie. I'd always been good at reading situations, had to be in construction. One missed detail, one overlooked problem, and the whole project could come crashing down. Marriage, as it turned out, followed similar principles. The evidence was everywhere once I knew what to look for. Soren's coffee mug in our dishwasher, even though he claimed to hate coffee. Hazel's sudden interest in cooking elaborate meals, something she'd never cared about before. But Soren was a chef at an upscale restaurant downtown. The way she'd started wearing perfume around the house, fixing her hair even on weekends. Most telling of all, the home security system I'd installed last year. Hazel had complained about it initially, said it made her feel like we were living in a fortress. But I'd insisted, especially after the break-ins in our neighborhood. Now I was grateful for my paranoia. The system logged every entry and exit, time-stamped and stored in the cloud. I spent my lunch break in my truck, scrolling through months of data on my phone. The pattern was clear as blueprint specifications. Every day I'd been in Phoenix, Soren had arrived at our house around noon and left after midnight. Sometimes he'd stayed until 3 or 4 in the morning. On the weekends I'd been gone, he'd never left at all. I screenshotted everything, uploaded it to a secure folder, and started building my case like Hazel would build one of hers. Methodical, thorough, devastating. That evening Soren came over for dinner. Nothing unusual there. We'd been having family dinners every Tuesday for years. But now I watched the interaction between him and my wife with new eyes, cataloging every shared glance, every casual touch, every inside joke I wasn't part of. "How's the Phoenix project wrapping up?" Soren asked, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "Must be nice to have that behind you." "Profitable," I said. "Opened up some new opportunities on the West Coast." Hazel looked up from her plate. "More travel?" "Possibly. There's a casino renovation in Vegas that could keep me busy for months." I watched them exchange a quick look, so fast most people would have missed it. But I'd been watching for it, waiting for it. Relief, excitement, the prospect of more time alone together. "That sounds like a great opportunity," Hazel said carefully. "When would it start?" "Soon, maybe next month." Another look. This one lasted a fraction of a second longer. "Well," Soren said, raising his wine glass, "here's to new opportunities." We clinked glasses, and I smiled at my brother and my wife, letting them think they were so clever, so careful, so perfectly deceptive. Let them plan their future together, their little family, their life built on my foundation. I had plans of my own. After Soren left, I helped Hazel clean up the kitchen. We moved around each other with practiced efficiency, a domestic dance we'd perfected over 8 years of marriage. She washed, I dried. She put away leftovers. I wiped down counters. Soren seems happy lately, I mentioned casually. Does he? I hadn't noticed. More confident, like something good happened in his life. Hazel's hands stilled in the soapy water for just a moment. Maybe he met someone. Maybe. He's been pretty secretive about his personal life recently. You know how he is. Private. Private. Right. The same brother who used to call me every week to complain about his latest romantic disaster was suddenly private about his love life. I finished drying the last plate and put it away, then kissed Hazel on the cheek, like a good husband should. I'm going to work in the garage for a while, I said. Got some estimates to finish. Okay, don't stay up too late. But I wasn't working on estimates. I was working on something much more important. My garage had become my war room. I'd cleared off my workbench and spread out everything I'd collected so far. Security system logs, phone records I'd pulled from our shared account, credit card statements showing charges at restaurants and hotels I'd never been to, receipts from purchases I'd never made. The picture they painted was crystal clear. While I'd been working 16-hour days in Phoenix, building the future I thought we wanted together, my wife and brother had been building a future of their own. I opened my laptop and started typing, organizing everything into a timeline. Dates, times, locations, evidence. I cross-referenced Hazel's work calendar with the security logs, her credit card charges with Soren's schedule at the restaurant. They'd been careful, but not careful enough. Lawyers think like lawyers. They plan for legal challenges, courtroom battles, reasonable doubt. They don't plan for husbands who think like contractors, who understand that the foundation always tells the truth about what's really holding up the structure. And this foundation was rotten to the core. I worked until 3 a.m, building my case piece by piece, brick by brick. When I finally went inside, Hazel was asleep, curled up on her side of our king-size bed, one hand resting on her still flat stomach. 8 weeks pregnant with my brother's child. I stood in the doorway for a long time, watching her sleep, and felt that cold calculation in my chest grow stronger. She looked peaceful, innocent even, like the woman I'd married, the woman I'd thought I knew. But that woman had never existed. This was just another performance, another lie in a marriage built on lies. Tomorrow, I decided, the performance would end. I've always believed that the best way to catch someone in a lie is to give them enough rope to hang themselves with. Construction taught me that. Sometimes you have to let a problem reveal itself fully before you can fix it properly. So I set a trap. The next morning, over coffee and toast, I made my announcement. I've been thinking about what you said, I told Hazel. About the Vegas project. She looked up from her phone, where she'd been scrolling through emails. What about it? Maybe it's time I started taking on bigger contracts, building the business instead of just maintaining it. That's great, Asher. I'm glad you're thinking bigger. The enthusiasm in her voice was almost convincing. Almost. The thing is, it would mean a lot more travel. Weeks at a time, maybe months. I'd have to hire a project manager here, someone to handle the local jobs while I'm gone. I think that's smart. You've been working so hard locally. Maybe it's time to expand. I buttered my toast slowly, deliberately. I was thinking I might ask Soren to help out more around here while I'm gone. Keep an eye on the house, help you with anything you need. Hazel's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. Just for a second, but I caught it. That's thoughtful, she said. But I can take care of myself, you know. I know you can. But it would make me feel better, knowing someone's looking out for you. Especially now. Now? I met her eyes across the table. With everything that's been going on, the stress at work, the changes we've been talking about, sometimes it helps to have family around. She nodded, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes, trying to figure out what I meant, what I knew, how much danger she was in. Besides, I continued, Soren's been having money troubles. I could pay him to check on things, maybe do some maintenance work. Win-win. You're very generous with your brother. Family takes care of family. That's how I was raised. I finished my breakfast and kissed her goodbye, just like every other morning for the past 8 years. But as I walked to my truck, I could feel her watching me through the kitchen window, trying to decode what had just happened. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her call Soren and try to figure out if their secret was still safe. Because I'd just handed them exactly what they wanted. My permission to spend more time together. My blessing on their affair. My complete and total trust in their loyalty. And I'd done it in a way that would seem perfectly innocent when they played back the conversation later. The first part of my plan was already in motion. I drove to the job site, a small office renovation downtown, and threw myself into work with an intensity that surprised my crew. Ripping out old drywall, tearing up flooring, demolishing walls that were no longer needed. Physical labor had always helped me think, and today I needed clarity more than ever. "Boss," my foreman Jake called out around noon, "You okay? You've been going at that wall like it owed you money." I stopped swinging the sledgehammer and wiped sweat from my forehead, just working through some problems. "Anything we can help with?" "Not the kind of problems you fix with tools." Jake nodded knowingly. He'd been through a rough divorce 2 years earlier, lost half his assets and most of his faith in marriage. "Want to talk about it?" "Not yet. But thanks." I went back to demolition, each swing of the hammer punctuating my thoughts. Hazel would call Soren within the hour, probably already had. They'd meet for lunch, or she'd stop by the restaurant and they'd try to figure out what my sudden generosity meant. They'd convince themselves it was good news, that I was making their lives easier, giving them more opportunities to be together. They'd see it as confirmation that their deception was working perfectly. They wouldn't realize I was giving them enough rope to hang themselves with. My phone buzzed around 2 p.m. Text message from Hazel. "Had lunch with Jocelyn. She says hi. Working late tonight, don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time. Another lie. So casual and effortless it was almost artistic. She wasn't with Jocelyn. I'd already confirmed that Jocelyn was in court all afternoon on a case that wouldn't wrap up until evening. But I knew where Hazel really was. The same place she'd been every Tuesday afternoon for the past month, according to the credit card records I'd been studying. The Riverside Hotel, room 412, registered under Soren's name. I could drive over there right now, kick down the door, confront them both, make a scene that would echo through our small city's gossip network for years. But that would be emotional, messy, unpredictable. That would be what they expected from someone like me, the blue-collar husband who solved problems with his fists instead of his brain. I had a better idea. Instead of driving to the hotel, I drove to the office supply store and bought a small digital recorder. Then I stopped by an electronics shop and picked up a GPS tracker, the kind paranoid spouses use to monitor cheating partners. But I wasn't going to use it on Hazel's car. I had something else in mind. That evening, I waited until Hazel texted that she was leaving the office and would be home in an hour. Then I drove to Soren's apartment complex and let myself into his building with the spare key he'd given me years ago for emergencies. His apartment was on the 3rd floor, a cramped one-bedroom that smelled like restaurant grease and cheap cologne. I'd been here dozens of times over the years, helping him move furniture, fixing his perpetually broken plumbing, lending him money he'd never pay back. Now I was here for a different kind of family visit. I planted the digital recorder under his kitchen table, where it would pick up phone conversations and any visitors he might have. The GPS tracker went under the bumper of his car, magnetic and virtually invisible. Then I sat down at his kitchen table and wrote him a note on his own stationery. "Soren, thanks for everything you've done for Hazel while I was in Phoenix. I know she appreciated having someone to talk to during that difficult time. Looking forward to working together more closely in the future. Family is everything. Asher." I left the note on his counter where he'd see it immediately, then let myself out and drove home. Hazel was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of wine and a stack of legal documents. She looked up when I came in, studying my face for any sign of suspicion or anger. "How was your day?" she asked. "Productive. Yours?" "Long. Jocelyn and I got caught up talking, then I had to go back to the office to finish some research." I nodded and got myself a glass from the cabinet. "Mind if I join you?" "Of course not." I poured myself some wine and sat down across from her, just like we'd done thousands of times before. But everything was different now. Every word was a chess move, every gesture calculated. "I've been thinking more about the Vegas project," I said. "Oh?" "I think I'm going to take it. The money's too good to pass up, and like you said, it's time to think bigger." Hazel smiled, and for a moment she almost looked like the woman I'd married. "I'm proud of you for taking the leap. It means I'll be gone for at least 2 months, maybe 3. Will you be okay here by yourself?" "I'll be fine. And Soren can check on me, like you suggested." "Actually, I already talked to him about it. Left him a note confirming the arrangement." Her wine glass paused halfway to her lips. "You saw Soren today?" "Stopped by his place on the way home. Wanted to make sure he was on board with helping out." "What did he say?" "He wasn't there, but I left him a message. I'm sure he'll be excited about the extra income." Hazel nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. She was wondering what exactly I'd said to Soren, whether I'd mentioned anything about the pregnancy, about my suspicions, about the timeline that didn't add up. Let her wonder. Let her call him later and compare notes, trying to figure out if their cover was blown, because tomorrow the real game would begin. The beauty of a well-laid trap is watching your prey walk into it willingly, even eagerly. Over the next week, I watched Hazel and Soren do exactly that. The GPS tracker on Soren's car told me everything I needed to know. Every lunch meeting at discreet restaurants across town, every afternoon rendezvous at the Riverside Hotel, every evening he spent at our house while I worked late at the job site. The digital recorder was even more revealing. I'd retrieve it every few days, downloading hours of conversations that painted a picture of 2 people desperately in love and desperately guilty about it. He left me a note. Soren's voice, tinny through the small speaker. Said he appreciated everything I'd done for you. "What kind of note?" Hazel, worried. "Friendly. Too friendly. Like he knows something but doesn't want to say it directly. Or like he doesn't know anything, and he's just being nice. When has your husband ever been just nice to me? He tolerates me, Hazel. He's never appreciated me." A long pause, then Hazel's voice, softer. Maybe he's changing. Maybe becoming a father is making him more family-oriented. "He's not becoming a father. I am. Keep your voice down. It's my apartment. It's thin walls." Another pause. Then Soren again. "When are you going to tell him?" "Tell him what?" "About us. About the baby. About everything." "I can't. Not yet." "When then? When you're showing? When the baby comes? When it starts calling me daddy?" "I need more time to figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out, Hazel. You're having my child. We're in love. He deserves to know the truth." "And then what?" "He divorces me. I lose half my assets. My career reputation gets destroyed, and you lose your job because he owns half the restaurant where you work." I'd forgotten about that detail. 2 years ago, I'd invested in Chez Laurent when the original owner was facing bankruptcy. It had seemed like a good way to help Soren advance his career while diversifying my portfolio. Now it was just another piece of leverage. "So what's your plan?" Soren asked. "Stay married to him forever? Raise our child as his?" "I don't know. Maybe. Would that be so terrible? For who? For him, living a lie? For me, watching another man raise my son or daughter? For the kid, growing up not knowing their real father? People do it all the time. Not me. I won't live like that." "Then what do you suggest?" Tell him. Tonight. Get it over with. I'm not ready. You'll never be ready. But ready or not, this situation is going to explode eventually. Better to control it than let it control us. Smart advice, actually. Too bad they wouldn't take it. I listened to the entire conversation while sitting in my truck outside a hardware store, taking notes on a legal pad like I was preparing for a deposition. Every detail mattered now. Every admission, every fear, every plan they made without knowing I was already 10 steps ahead. That evening, I came home to find Hazel cooking dinner. Actually cooking, not just reheating takeout. The kitchen smelled like garlic and herbs, and she'd set the table with our good dishes. "What's the occasion?" I asked. "No occasion. Just felt like making something nice." But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided meeting my eyes directly. She'd made a decision about something, and she was working up the courage to follow through. "Smells great. Need any help?" "Just open some wine, the good bottle, from the rack." I selected a bottle of Cabernet we'd been saving for a special occasion and uncorked it carefully. "Should I wait for Soren? Isn't this Tuesday?" "He's not coming tonight, just us." Interesting. A deviation from the pattern. I poured 2 glasses and handed one to her, watching as she took a small sip. Pregnant women weren't supposed to drink alcohol, but maybe she was still in denial about the whole situation. Or maybe she was trying to work up liquid courage for whatever conversation she'd planned. We ate in relative silence, making small talk about work and weather and everything except the elephant in the room. Hazel kept glancing at me like she was trying to read my thoughts, and I kept my expression neutral, patient. Finally, over dessert, she made her move. "Asher, there's something I need to tell you." I set down my fork and gave her my full attention. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about us, about our marriage, our future, what we both want." "Okay. I think we've grown apart over the past few years. We want different things, we're moving in different directions." I nodded thoughtfully. "I can see that. The travel, the work stress, the different social circles, it's been challenging." She looked surprised that I was agreeing with her. "Yes, exactly, and I think maybe we should consider taking some time apart to figure out what we really want. A separation? A trial separation. Nothing legal, nothing permanent, just some space to think." I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. She was trying to create distance, establish a framework where she could spend more time with Soren without it looking suspicious. Smart, from a legal standpoint. "How long are we talking about?" I asked. "I don't know. A few months, maybe. You could take that Vegas contract, focus on building the business. I could focus on my career, maybe take on some bigger cases. And after a few months, we reassess, see how we feel, what we want." I was quiet for a long time, letting her sweat. She'd rehearsed this conversation, probably with Soren's help, but she hadn't anticipated my calm reaction. "There's someone else," I said finally. It wasn't a question. Hazel's face went pale. "What?" "You want a separation because there's someone else. That's the only reason people ask for space in a marriage." "Asher, It's okay," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I understand." She stared at me, confused. This wasn't going according to her script. "You understand?" "I've been traveling a lot, working long hours, not paying enough attention to you. It makes sense that you'd find companionship elsewhere." "I haven't—" "Hazel." I squeezed her hand gently. "It's okay. I'm not angry." She pulled her hand away. "Why aren't you angry?" "Because anger won't fix anything. If you're not happy, if you found someone who makes you happier, then maybe separation is the right choice." "Just like that? What's the alternative? Fight about it? Make accusations? Force you to stay in a marriage you don't want?" She was staring at me like I'd grown a second head. "Most husbands would be furious. I'm not most husbands. No, she said quietly. You're not. We finished dinner in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. Hazel was trying to figure out why I was making this so easy for her. I was calculating how much rope I'd just handed her. Later, as we got ready for bed, she brought it up again. So, we're really doing this? A separation? If that's what you want. It is. Then yes, we're really doing this. She nodded, but she didn't look relieved. She looked confused, suspicious, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She was right to be suspicious. Because while she'd been planning her confession, I'd been planning something much more comprehensive. The separation she wanted was about to become the least of her problems. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. The next morning, I woke up early and made coffee for 2, just like I had every morning for 8 years. Hazel came downstairs in her robe, looking tired and uncertain. About last night, she began. No second thoughts, I said, handing her a mug. If you want space, you should have it. When would you leave for Vegas? Next week, probably. I need to finish up a few things here first. She nodded, but I could see her mind working. A week was longer than she'd expected, more time for complications to arise. Actually, I continued, I was thinking about staying at Soren's place until then. Give you some immediate space, let you adjust to the idea gradually. You don't have to do that. I want to. Besides, it'll give me a chance to spend some time with my brother before I leave town for months. Another look of confusion crossed her face. She was getting everything she wanted, but my cooperation was making her nervous. If that's what you prefer, she said finally. It is. I finished my coffee and went upstairs to pack a bag. Just a few days' worth of clothes, toiletries, work boots, everything I needed to maintain the illusion that this was a temporary arrangement. But I also packed something else, a small digital camera with a motion sensor, the kind hunters use to monitor wildlife. I'd be installing it in a very different kind of habitat. An hour later, I was standing in Soren's kitchen, explaining the new living arrangements. She asked for a separation, I told him, watching his face carefully. Want some space to figure things out. I'm sorry, man, that's rough. Yeah, well, maybe it's for the best. We've been having problems for a while. Still, it can't be easy. It's not. But I'd rather deal with it honestly than pretend everything's fine when it's not. Soren nodded sympathetically, but I could see the excitement behind his eyes. This was everything he and Hazel had hoped for, my voluntary removal from the equation, no messy confrontations or legal battles. You can stay here as long as you need, he said. The couch pulls out into a bed. Thanks. I appreciate it. What are brothers for? Indeed. I spent the day at work, but my mind was on the evening ahead. Soren would call Hazel as soon as his shift ended, and they'd make plans to celebrate their good fortune. Probably dinner at a nice restaurant, maybe a night at the hotel, definitely a lot of conversation about their future together. They'd feel safe, protected by my apparent acceptance of the situation. They'd let their guard down, speak more freely, make bigger plans, and I'd be recording every word. The wildlife camera went into Soren's bedroom while he was at work, positioned to capture the entire room with perfect clarity. The digital recorder stayed under the kitchen table, but I added a second one in the living room, hidden inside an old radio that hadn't worked in years. Then I settled in to wait. Soren came home around 11 p.m. whistling and checking his phone. He went straight to the shower, then dressed in his best shirt and cologne. Going out? I asked from the couch. Yeah, meeting a friend for drinks. You okay here by yourself? I'll be fine. Don't wait up. He left, and I gave him a 10-minute head start before following. The GPS tracker led me to Chez Laurent, the restaurant where he worked. But instead of going inside, he met Hazel in the parking lot, and they drove to her car to a wine bar across town. I found a table in the back corner, ordered a beer, and watched them celebrate their victory. They were careful not to be too affectionate in public, but I could see the intimacy between them, the way they leaned toward each other, the way their hands touched briefly across the table, the way they smiled like they shared the most wonderful secret in the world, which, from their perspective, they did. I couldn't hear their conversation from across the room, but I didn't need to. Their body language told the whole story. Relief, excitement, anticipation. They were making plans, talking about the future, imagining a life together without the complication of an inconvenient husband. They left after an hour, and I followed them back to Soren's apartment building. Hazel's car stayed in the parking lot all night. The next morning, I was up early, making coffee and reading the newspaper when they emerged from the bedroom. Hazel was wearing one of Soren's shirts, her hair messy from sleep. She froze when she saw me. "Morning," I said cheerfully. "Coffee's fresh." "Asher," she stammered. "I didn't know you were here." "Soren's letting me crash on his couch, remember? Hope I didn't keep you awake. This old building has thin walls." Soren appeared behind her, shirtless and looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world. "We were just," he began. "Having breakfast," I finished. "I can see that. Want me to make eggs? I'm pretty good at scrambled." They stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Here was their worst nightmare, being caught together by the husband they'd been deceiving, and I was offering to cook breakfast. "Actually," Hazel said, grabbing her purse, "I should get going. Early meeting." "On Saturday?" "Client emergency. You know how it is." She kissed Soren on the cheek, a casual, friendly gesture that fooled no one, and hurried out of the apartment. Soren and I stood in the kitchen looking at each other across 8 years of brotherhood and betrayal. "She seems nice," I said finally. "Asher, listen. No need to explain. I know you two have been spending time together. She told me she's been talking to someone, working through our marital problems. I'm glad it's you." "You are." "Of course. Who better than family? You understand both of us. You want what's best for everyone involved." Soren sat down at the kitchen table looking confused and guilty and relieved all at once. "I do want what's best," he said, "for everyone." "I know you do. That's why I'm not worried about leaving town. I know you'll take care of her." "About that. In fact," I continued, "I've been thinking about making some changes, permanent ones." "What kind of changes?" "Selling the house, maybe. Moving to Vegas full-time if the work there develops into something bigger. Starting fresh." Soren's eyes lit up. That's a big decision." "Sometimes big decisions are the right ones, especially when everyone involved gets what they really want." "And what is it you think people want?" I smiled at my brother, my wife's lover, the father of the child she was carrying. "Happiness," I said. "Everyone deserves to be happy." He nodded, buying into the fiction that I was the noble, self-sacrificing husband who would step aside for the greater good. Poor Soren. He had no idea that happiness was about to become the least of his concerns, because while he'd been celebrating his victory, I'd been preparing for war, and the first battle was about to begin. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes everything seem possible. I woke up on Soren's couch, made coffee, and checked the recordings from the weekend. 12 hours of audio, 3 hours of video, and enough evidence to end 2 careers and destroy 3 lives. But I wasn't ready to use it yet. I had something bigger in mind. The Morrison & Associates annual gala was scheduled for Friday night, the biggest social event in our city's legal community. Hazel had been planning her outfit for weeks, talking about the cases she'd discuss, the connections she'd make, the image she'd project. She had no idea she'd be the evening's main entertainment. I spent the week making final preparations. Copies of everything were uploaded to cloud storage, backed up on external drives, and stored in a safety deposit box I'd opened across town. I prepared a presentation that would have made Hazel proud. Charts, timelines, audio clips, photographs, all organized with the precision of a legal brief. Then I bought a ticket to the gala. "You're going to the Morrison thing?" Soren asked when I mentioned it Thursday night. Thought I'd surprise Hazel, show some support for her career before I leave town. Does she know? It's a surprise. Besides, we may be separated, but we're still married, still a team, professionally speaking. Soren looked uncomfortable, but he didn't push the issue. He'd been walking on eggshells around me all week, trying to figure out if my continued cooperation was genuine or if I was planning something. Smart man. Too bad he wasn't smart enough. Friday evening, I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to our wedding 8 years earlier, and drove to the Riverside Hotel, the same hotel where my wife and brother had been meeting for their afternoon encounters. The irony was delicious. The ballroom was full of lawyers, judges, and other legal professionals, all networking and socializing and pretending to enjoy each other's company. I spotted Hazel immediately. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, her hair styled in an elegant updo, working the room like the professional she was. Soren was there too, serving drinks at the bar. He saw me enter and nearly dropped a martini shaker. I walked over to him first. Evening, brother. Nice setup they have here. What are you doing here? Supporting my wife. Is that so strange? I thought you were leaving for Vegas tomorrow. Change of plans. Decided to stick around for a few more days. Wrap up some loose ends. I ordered a whiskey and watched him pour it with shaking hands. Nervous about something? I asked. Just busy. Big crowd tonight. Indeed. Lot of important people here. Judges, senior partners, city council members, the kind of people who shape reputations and careers. Soren handed me my drink without meeting my eyes. Enjoy the party, he mumbled. Oh, I intend to. I found Hazel near the silent auction tables, chatting with a group of her colleagues. She saw me approaching, and her face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, concern, and finally a forced smile. Asher! What a surprise. I didn't know you were coming. Wanted to see you in your element. You look beautiful. Thank you. How did you even get a ticket? These things are usually members only. I made a donation to the Legal Aid Society. Turns out money talks, even in legal circles. Her colleagues were looking at me with polite interest, trying to place me in their social hierarchy. Blue-collar husband, construction company owner, not quite their usual crowd. Everyone, this is my husband Asher, Hazel said. Asher, this is Patricia Morrison, senior partner, and James Wheeler, circuit court judge. We shook hands and made small talk about business and the economy. I was charming, deferential, everything a supportive spouse should be. But I could see Hazel watching me nervously, wondering what I was really doing there. If you'll excuse me, I said after a few minutes, I see someone I need to speak with. I walked to the front of the ballroom where a small stage had been set up for the evening's presentations. The master of ceremonies was testing the microphone, preparing for the awards ceremony that would begin in 20 minutes. 20 minutes to get into position. I approached him with a confident smile. Excuse me, I'm Asher Trevin. I believe there's been a scheduling change for tonight's program. He checked his clipboard. I don't see anything about a change. Patricia Morrison asked me to speak briefly about the legal aid donation my company made. Something about recognizing community partnerships. I handed him a business card and a folded piece of paper that looked official. I don't have this on my schedule, he said, confused. Last-minute addition. You know how these things go. But Ms. Morrison was very specific about including it before the main awards ceremony. He glanced around the room, looking for Patricia Morrison, but she was surrounded by a crowd of people. How long is your remarks? 5 minutes, tops. Just a brief thank you and some thoughts about supporting legal services for working families. He hesitated, then added my name to his list. Right after the welcome remarks, before Judge Wheeler's presentation. Perfect. Thank you. I walked back into the crowd, my heart pounding with anticipation. Everything was falling into place exactly as I'd planned. Hazel found me near the bar, where Soren was still working. What was that about? She asked. What was what about? You were talking to the MC, It looked official. Just introducing myself, networking like you always tell me I should do. She studied my face, looking for signs of deception. The irony wasn't lost on me. Asher, if you're planning something, what would I be planning? It's your night, Hazel. Your colleagues, your world. I'm just here to support you. The MC tapped the microphone, getting everyone's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, if you could take your seats, we'll begin this evening's program. People started moving toward the tables, drinks in hand, conversations winding down. Hazel squeezed my arm. Sit with me? Wouldn't miss it. We found seats at a table near the front, surrounded by her colleagues and their spouses. I made polite conversation, complimented the food, acted like the devoted husband who was proud of his wife's success. But inside, I was counting down the minutes. The MC welcomed everyone, thanked the sponsors, and made a few jokes that got polite laughter. Then he looked at his notes. Before we begin our awards ceremony, we have a special presentation from one of our community partners. Please welcome Asher Trevan, representing Trevan Construction and tonight's major donor to our legal aid fund. Applause filled the room as I stood up and walked to the stage. I could see Hazel's face in the crowd, pale and confused. Soren had stopped serving drinks and was staring at me from behind the bar. I took the microphone and looked out at the crowd of lawyers, judges, and legal professionals. Thank you, I began. I'm honored to be here tonight, surrounded by so many people who dedicate their lives to truth and justice. More applause. I'm not a lawyer myself, I'm just a construction worker who builds things. But I've learned that the foundation of any structure has to be solid, or everything built on top of it will eventually collapse. I paused, letting that sink in. Tonight, I want to talk about foundations, about truth, about what happens when the people we trust most build their lives on lies. The room was getting quiet now, people sensing that this wasn't going to be a typical donor speech. 8 weeks ago, my wife became pregnant. I heard Hazel gasp from the audience. Now, that should be happy news for any married couple, except I was out of town when it happened. 2,000 miles away, working on a project that was supposed to secure our future together. The room was completely silent now. So I started wondering, who was taking care of my wife while I was gone? Who was keeping her company, helping her through this difficult time? I looked directly at Soren, who was backing toward the kitchen door. The answer, as it turns out, was my brother. I clicked a remote control, and the large screen behind me lit up with a photograph, Hazel and Soren entering the Riverside Hotel together. For the past 3 months, while I was building a business I thought would support our family, my wife and my brother were building a family of their own. More photographs flashed on the screen. Security camera footage, credit card receipts, GPS tracking data, all time-stamped and documented. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a private matter, a family issue that doesn't belong in a public forum. I clicked to the next slide, audio waveforms and transcripts. But here's the thing about truth. It has a way of demanding to be heard. I pressed play, and Soren's voice filled the ballroom through the sound system. It's my apartment. He's not becoming a father. I am. When are you going to tell him? The room erupted. People were standing, shouting, some trying to leave. But I wasn't finished. Ladies and gentlemen of the legal profession, I said, my voice cutting through the chaos, I present to you the case of Trevan versus Trevan. 8 years of marriage, built on a foundation of lies. 3 months of deception, documented and verified. 1 pregnancy, 1 affair, 1 family destroyed. I looked directly at Hazel, who was sitting frozen in her chair. The defense rests. I set the microphone down and walked off the stage, leaving behind a room full of shocked lawyers and one very public ending to a very private betrayal. Behind me, I could hear Hazel calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I'd said everything I needed to say. The foundation had finally collapsed, just like I'd predicted. And I was walking away from the wreckage with my head held high. The game was over. I'd won. But more importantly, everyone now knew exactly what kind of people they were dealing with. Truth, as I'd learned in construction, always finds a way to the surface. And tonight, it had brought the whole structure crashing down.